started.
Hey.
All right, folks, we are live. Welcome back. This is Steve, and I got a couple of jokers here on the screen with me, and we're going to go over some Commodore 64 repair. This is the first time I have done something like this live in person, so that's going to be a little bit of excitement. And my whole stream setup here is different than it normally is, so let me know if there's any issues in the chat. I actually have this computer that I'm looking at is doing all of the video capture with 3 different video sources, and then over my shoulder is the streaming computer that I am using Zoom to zoom from this computer to that computer to you guys, and it's all just kind of like, if you thought RF was bad, wait until you get into this. With me today, and let's see if I can do the camera angles right because they're always backwards in Zoom. Over here, hey, I got it right, is Joe from Joe's Computer Museum. Joe, take it away. Tell us about your channel.
Hey everybody, Joe from Joe's Computer Museum here on the YubTubs. Yeah, I take apart, repair, collect, and do everything primarily with 8-bit computers, but also with some Macs, and I have an Amiga and some other stuff as well. And I've been really getting into the electronics stuff, the repair lately. And that's really all there is to it. Other things going on, however, I do want to mention, since I have the attention of a whole bunch of people, is the Marcintosh thing. If you've seen Marcintosh, that's coming up soon, marcintosh.com. This March, doing Macs, classic Macs. We're all jumping in and having fun with it. So come on by to any of our channels and watch us have fun with Macs next month.
So Joe, what's the upper limit cutoff, the processor or age limit?
The cutoff for that, we are thinking, well, it's got to be 68K or PowerPC. No Intel stuff. We're trying to keep it vintage. And we're trying to put the cutoff at Mac OS 9. We will, not that we have any hard set rules, it's more of a set of suggestions, but it is kind of allowable in a stretch to do something newer as long as you are emphasizing its application or role in something in a past machine. So like you wanted to do Mac OS X and how it got there and all of the Mac OSs before it or something like a history thing, that would be okay. But we're trying to really focus on those classic, Mac OS 6, Mac OS 7 style 68K like stuff, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. And if you guys have seen any of the other themed tagged months, there was Septandy and there was Dawcember, and now there's Marcintosh, and I don't know, I'm thinking about doing ZX81 Pro.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
So I have a new old stock, unbuilt, got it off of eBay, ZX81 kit that I'm going to put together in April.
Cool.
So
sounds good.
That can be the next one. So the next person on the list is Dr. Dave. Dr. Dave, take it away.
Folks. I'm Dave, or Dr. Dave on YouTube, or if we're drinking in the pub. I'm a real doctor, a PhD in computer sciences. You'll see pretty shortly that that's not going to help here. but I've had my 64 since I was 13 years old in 1983, and that's the one that I have in front of me now. My channel is Dr. Dave's Diversions. The link's in the description. Yeah, please join me. I'm a pretty new channel. And Dr. Dave's Diversions is about anything I want it to be about, but mostly it's been 75% retro stuff, Commodore and Amiga stuff. I'm looking forward to Marcintosh, and I'll be doing Mac emulator on the Amiga, following up on the oft said phrase that the fastest Mac is an Amiga. So that's what I'm going after. So if you're doing something with emulation of the Mac, especially if you're interested in doing it on the Amiga or something, join and we'll make a playlist or something like that stuff.
Yeah, so you're talking about emulation, but you're also talking about 68K hardware. So how much emulation is there? Is it really just running the OS in a window or something?
The way I'm going to do it pretty bare. I have Mac 128 ROMs on my Amiga hardware, and I'm going to run running System 6. So I'm going to go back to 1991 and basically run the machine exactly as I did. For the small subset of you that know my channel, my whole Dawcember project was about the XT Bridge board on the Amiga, that as I ran it in 1981 or 1991 rather. So it'll be exactly the Mac equivalent of that. And I'll try to tell hopefully an interesting story about what it was like really to do it then, because I'll show you, my resume from them that I found on the Mac, drive and stuff like that.
Awesome.
Anyway, thanks for having me.
Cool.
Yeah, great. And then last but not least is right below me is Matt. Matt has a channel called Retro Bits. Tell us about it, Matt.
Hey guys, so thanks very much for organizing this, Steve. Really happy to be here. I'm a new YouTuber, started this channel during the pandemic as a reason to explore retro systems that I never got a chance to when I was a child. I've been into computers ever since I was probably 3 or 4 years old. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and I consider myself to be extremely fortunate to have been able to experience the 8 and 16-bit eras all the way through end to end. I've been just into computers my whole life, ever since my parents brought home their very first TI-99 4A, through the Apples, through the Commodores, right on through to today. I've always been into creating things, from starting my first BBS at age 11 to running an internet radio station, and now the YouTube channel. So it's a real great reason to play with things and to share those new experiences with people. So I'm really, really happy to be here and to be doing that.
All right, excellent. Welcome,
Wow,
Matt.
Matt, are you my clone? Because your backstory is like almost the exact same as mine.
No kidding.
Except for the BBS, everything's identical.
Huh. Well, hey, glad to hear.
Matt did mention he and I are also gearheads.
Oh yes, yeah. Big time gearheads, love cars, and also I should have mentioned, Dave clued me into Marcintosh, and not being a 68K Mac or classic Mac person myself, but being an Amiga guy, I'm kind of taking a similar tack as him, and I'm going to be doing some software-only emulation on a 68K Amiga for Marcintosh, and it's coming out real well. I'm really excited. I haven't played with Macs before, but I've been doing it all weekend, and it's coming out really well. So,
all right. All right, excellent. So we've got some chat stuff to catch up on. First off, while I'm going through that, Mr. Brent Blades in the chat is asking Dr. Dave what his doctoral thesis was on.
Oh, my doctoral thesis was on, I study the internet. I measure the internet and develop internet protocols. So what my thesis was about is about classifying traffic using the DNS. Something that's really hot today, in fact, very privacy concerning. But a decade or so when I wrote my thesis, it was about leveraging or developing techniques to measure traffic, keeping them private if you just knew the DNS names associated with it. Thanks for asking. That's like the third time since I got my PhD. Really
all right. And then another thing that we've got going on is right about this time, Ham Radio 2.0 is putting on his usual Sunday live stream, and this is not a ham radio show, so there shouldn't be a whole lot of problems with that. If you'd like to go catch his show instead of this one, Team Replay for the win, just leave a like on your way out the door. I will understand, or come flip back and forth and see what we're doing, see what Jason's doing. Not trying to steal any of the audience, but I did have a schedule conflict with some of the guys on the video here, where this was the only time that they had available to make this happen. And I really wanted to, move forward and get this collaboration here together. And what we're trying to do is work on, I've got 2 Commodore 64s that were donated to the channel from Don Diagidio, and he is in the chat. And he actually donated a couple of other really interesting things. And at first turn on, those 2 did not work, so we're going to try and figure out what's going on there. And then I have 2 other ones that we picked up, and if none of this works out well, then we'll just talk about how awesome retro technology is for an hour, and that'll be fun too. So without too much further ado, let me switch the camera angles over, and that gets me up in the upper corner there, and what you can see is my beautiful face still, and then directly below me is the dead test cartridge that's running through an iteration of the dead test. It's been running since, I don't know, about 20 minutes now since the stream has started, and a little bit before. And then this is the 60 clone board, the fabulous 60 clone board. This is a beautiful piece of artwork here. And there's probably, I don't know, 16 or 20 videos on my channel of assembling this. So basically I'm starting out with this board, just proving to everybody that it does indeed work, or at least it worked as I turned it on at the beginning of the stream. And all of the ICs on this board are socketed. So now that we know that that works, let's get it off the bench, turn it off. And there goes my video capture, as it should. And
Do you guys happen to know that board, the clone, which specific one of the 64 boards is it mimicking?
so this is a 250407, and he actually has a couple of different flavors of this. So this is the one that I picked, but I think he's got 4 or 5 of them. So.
And that version too, that happens to be the clone of one of the earlier revisions, right? That's got the large number of chips on it.
Yes, there is a later version that has less chips on it. And this one here happens to be a 250407 also. So we've got the keyboard off, and we plug power in, and we plug video in. And this one I kind of cheated. I've already looked at it once before, and I wrote down up top here that it has a black screen issue. And unfortunately, there's not a lot socketed on this, but let's turn it on, see if the video capture comes up. And there is the black screen, and you can see on the side of the display a little thin white line. So what are your thoughts?
So do we have the power light? Do we know?
The power light's on the keyboard, and the keyboard is over there.
Okay.
But
so
that's just an LED. I can check that out with the
the first things that I'd be interested to check is the 5-volt power, see that the LED's on. And the next thing that I would do, because I'm not used to using a dead test cartridge, is I would issue a DOS command on the keyboard and see if we think the machine's running or not. So we can isolate it to a video problem as opposed to something else.
Okay, so to test 5-volt power, what I normally do is locate it's hidden there. Locate the 7805 voltage regulator down here in the bottom corner, and check on the outside rail. We've got 12.48 volts going in, and on the pin, it's labeled pin 132. So on pin 2, which is the other outside one,
You're checking the 5-volt can voltage as opposed to the 5-volt supply voltage, right?
I would not know.
I think we want the supply voltage is what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Do we have 5 volts from the supply?
You can test that. The supply dumps the supply dumps generic voltages that are brought down by regulators on the board. Does not. The supply gives something like 19 volts both AC and DC that are then changed and rectified inside the system to for other purposes.
Well, it gives you 5-volt DC to the chips and to the LED, right? And then it takes the 9-volt AC and turns that into 12-volt DC and 5-volt can. So the very first thing is the equivalent of is the LED on. That's just if the 5-volt from the supply is there. It has nothing to do with the voltage regulators or anything, and a bunch of the chips are going to be powered off that.
And so what I'm doing now, Dave, is I've got the meter hooked up to the LED connection, and you can see 4.92 there. And actually, if one of you guys could watch the chat and call out anything in the chat, because I can't see it while we're doing that. So there's a couple of other power points along the board to check. Also, the cassette port and the user port on the back also put out some voltages there.
Yeah, I always check the user port because it has both sets of voltages. It's got the DC.
That's a great place to get at the can voltage and stuff too, I suppose. Huh? And no, it's the raw AC is on the user port.
Yep. Yeah, you got the raw 9-volt AC as well as the 5-volt DC. And it's a good sign that you're getting that white line on your video capture because it's off the range of most CRT monitors, but the fact that you're getting it may indicate that the VIC itself is good in getting power.
Okay, and so I've got 4.89 at the user port, and where's the other one? And 5.6 point something. Yeah, so isn't the user port supposed to have the 12 volts on it also? Or is that the cassette port?
Yeah, the cassette motor I think runs off the unregulated 9-volt.
Yes, I'm getting 6 volts and 5 volts out of there. Okay.
Yeah, the C64 user port pin out to pins 10 and 11 are 9 volts AC. And pin 2 was the 5 volts you tested. And that's all that's on the user port. I think the idea is the peripheral would have to do its own regulation off the 9-volt AC if it had serious requirements.
And this is where it gets dangerous because I got to get this.
It does get dangerous, right? Right, Matt?
Oh yeah, no. I was probing for voltages, testing out that keylog power supply just the other week, and I accidentally shorted out my user port. Fortunately, it just fried the fuse, the quick blow fuse, which no big deal. I went on Amazon to buy one fuse, and I could buy one for $8, or I could buy 200 for $8. So guess which one I ended up with?
Yeah.
Now I have
A
200.
web store that sells fuses?
Yeah, exactly. And in order to monetize my channel and make up for this really addictive habit that I have here, I'm going to start selling fuses, folks.
Torch store.
So I go
You
back
get a
and
fuse.
forth on that a lot on my channel. I'll get a kit and then I will order the parts from Mauser in like quantity 1, quantity 2. And I don't really know the right answer to that question. So I have one where I ordered all the parts and they all showed up and I made some mistakes in the ordering. And I have a second one where I raided my stash and I only had half the parts. So I still had to order from Mauser at the end of the day. All right, so I've got the can off of the Vic. Let's turn this thing back on. And there's no dead test cartridge in it. We still have that white line on the screen. So you said, Matt, you said there might be something to think about with the Vic here?
My thinking now is that the VIC is getting power and it's probably working. So that's probably a good sign. But, you know, we'll have to check some of the other places first.
So Matt and Joe, I was curious about what do you think of what's the best way to determine if the machine is running and we just can't see it?
Well, I liked your idea of issuing a DOS command. I've seen that done before, and you know, it sounds like a pretty quick and easy test. See if we can get the disk to spin. My go-to is just to boot it on a dead test, though. I always just boot it.
I'm thinking of the poor schmucks like me that don't have a dead test cartridge, and probably 90% of the people that ever watch this won't have one. And I love the dead test cartridge, and I want to see what shows there. But the things that that I've read to do would be put a fast load cartridge in, type a $sign with a drive on it, and see if it works. Because immediately then you know the memory's not the problem, likely the CPU is not the problem, some of the CIA stuff maybe is not the problem, but right away we want to divide video from non-video, right?
Right.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Actually, I like that idea.
All right, so
Second the motion.
we will try that. And what I have is an SD2 IC, which lit up when I plugged it in, when I powered it up. So we'll power it up again. There we go. So we're getting power out of the cassette port, which is what powers this particular version. And then I need to plug a keyboard in. And we will take the keyboard that it came with.
We've got a comment from chat from Saizo Kishimoto saying that he tests the RAM for hotspots on black screen with video sync. No tools required.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And nothing is too hot to touch. So back to keyboard. You see that Toroid radio, folks?
Did you check the color RAM, the color attribute RAM as well?
I did not. Which chip
Those
is
are
that?
I believe those are the two in the very lower right, just below the SID, or the PLA, I should say.
Yeah, so it's one of these ones here. And I think it's not even like a RAM chip, right? It's more like a 74 series chip that's used wrong or something like that.
It's the static RAM, isn't it?
Okay, so I don't have a fast load cartridge, but now we've got the LED light on the keyboard. So LOAD space quote $ quote comma 8, and we'll hope that all those keys work. And let's see. Nope.
Okay. So that's the more complicated answer.
Yeah.
So we can probably. Yeah. So now you're thinking socketed chips. What's the easiest to swap with your known good ones, right?
And
Is
I
there
only
anything socketed there?
I would pull the SID out because we don't need it to do a bunch of tests.
You don't need either CIA or the SID to get to the boot screen.
And so that's where we run into the first problem with this. I only have two chips that are socketed here, and that is the VIC itself and the ROM. And I think that's the character ROM, is that right?
So another quick and dirty thing to do would be to just pop the chips, throw in the deoxidant, and reseat them before anything else. But since there are so few socketed chips, it's probably not even worth, too much effort. Black screens are most often caused by, on these boards, a bad PLA or a bad RAM chip. And if neither of those are socketed,
If neither of those are socketed, you want a dead test cartridge, right?
yep.
Yeah. And we do have other boards to test. And the shopping list on this might be remove some more chips and revisit at a later date. I don't have any deoxit. I have this QD electronic cleaner, and it's going to blast. Give that a bit of a second to dry up. And then we will put the Vic back in.
I'm trying to diagnose it backwards as what do we have on the machine? Well, we know we have video.
Yeah, the
we
only
have
thing.
sync, so it means we got timing.
But we don't think the CPU is running code. So we got the kernel ROM to suspect. We got memory to suspect. We got the CPU to suspect. We've got the SID to suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Where we're going this, and Matt alluded to it. The starting point where I'd go if I
Blank and white.
first time I was doing this would be Ray Carlson's blank screen.txt documentation, the Commodore 64 service manual that lists the common causes of this. I'm just saying for the audience, like that's where I would go. I don't have time to read those right now, but that's your starting point if you don't have magical mystery diagnostic harnesses.
So we got a couple of blinks on the screen, but I don't know that I have the ability to count those up properly with the video capture. And these RAM chips are pretty cold. And so
Can you boot it again, just to kind of get a feel for what the blinks were? I did see it flashing white. I didn't get a count.
I think it was 2, but then it didn't blink again. And usually it just blinks, 2, 2, 2. And now it's not blinking at all.
Tio, do you have any cartridge games at all?
I do not. I have it.
Those are interesting to plug in because a subset of them don't need the kernel at all.
So the dead test cartridge doesn't need any ROMs.
But it would need the CPU. And
yeah.
How does the dead test cartridge not having it? How does it signal to you that something's going on if it's not this? Other than the screen, does it have LEDs or something?
Oh, yellow. That's a PLA issue. I think.
Yeah, PLA right there.
So what'll happen with the dead test cartridge, for those of you that haven't used it before, is when you first turn it on, it'll be absolutely black screen for a while. And what it's doing there is it's testing out all of the RAM chips. And then if it finds a bad RAM chip, it'll flash a screen code of white flashes, 5, 5, 5, 5. And that you go look up the documentation for it and it says it's this chip. Or whatever chip it happens to be. And then you replace that chip, or you piggyback that chip, because you can piggyback these RAM chips to just test them out, and then run through the sequence again, and you may have another bad RAM chip, and you go through that entire sequence until you get that white screen that you saw in the opening. And the white screen that you saw in the opening will then start testing out further devices, and there's no loopback stuff. I don't have the loopback set, but that will test out the user port, the cassette port, the keyboard, the joystick ports, both of them, and verify that all of those work.
So in this case, with Matt's hypothesis that the yellow meant PLA, would the dead test cartridge tell us something? Is that a good way to go to test that hypothesis?
Well, so right now, with this diagnosis on the screen telling me that the PLA is bad, I would remove the PLA, put another one in, and then move forward on the test.
And that's socketed there or no?
No, I took out the VIC and put it back in after cleaning it, because you can't do anything at all without the VIC. And I have the ROM still out. This is the kernel ROM. Somebody in the chat had spoke up about that. So I think that's as far as we can get with this one here if we think it's the PLA.
I agree.
There it is. I had a shield.
And Joe, do you use a dead test cartridge as well? I think I saw you.
Yes, I do.
The reason I'm asking is, do you think it would tell us anything without us having to swap the PLA that would help confirm this, or is
I really don't think so, because the theoretical operation of the dead test is it does all of these very low level tests first, and when it stops on that screen, you're not going to get past that screen with the yellow right now. You're not going to get past that until you resolve that problem.
I see.
And then it might tell you something else. Like if we resolve this, then it might do a basic RAM test and say RAM chip 6 is bad. And then you've got to resolve that. And you work through each of those total system failures up to whatever point, and then you start to get the more visual diagnostic screen.
Right, then you get the screwed up basic boot screen, and then you have to troubleshoot that. And then then your keyboard doesn't work, and you have to swap your CAs around. And
that's actually one thing I've been concerned about with these guys. I've repaired 6 of them so far, and it's like I'm kind of scared of selling them, because as it makes its way through the mail to your house, another one of these 40-year-old chips might have gone bad in the mail.
Yeah, all these machines are going to fail eventually. And there was a great talk by Bill Hurd at both VCF East and West in 2019 about basically age-related failure mechanisms for chips and why these machines are all going to fail, whether we use them or not. It was a very fascinating video, and it's on YouTube. So anybody who's interested in that, definitely check that out.
Yeah,
cool.
That's the unfortunate side effect of using these machines or not using them. Even if you just store them, eventually they will all fail. So enjoy them while you can. We got a question from the chat from Brent Blades. Can you piggyback a PLA? My feeling is no, but I haven't actually tried it.
I was going to ask that question too. I don't know the answer to that one.
I think PLA is a little bit too complex to do that properly, and a lot of them tend to die via short. So they're going to pull a rail high or low or something like that, which then is going to also cause signal problems with whatever you piggyback. So it probably won't work.
So what I'm going to suggest is that we put this one away. I've marked on my shopping list here to desolder the PLA and redo it. But I think we should move on to another machine, since we do have other ones to look at, instead of getting out the noisy desoldering iron and going through that process, because that'll take the next half hour.
Cool.
Oh, look at Matt with the slide. Oh, that's awesome.
He's good.
I did a summary of this in my Commodore SX64 repair video, and I summarized Bill's presentation, cut it down from an hour down to about 60 seconds. But there's the gist of it. And the fact of the matter is that using these machines will cause them to wear out, or not using them will cause to wear out, because of they were built to a price point. The packaging of the chips themselves is not waterproof, so moisture will penetrate into the machine, into the chips. Depending on the environment you store them in, they're going to die sitting on a shelf in a basement, or they're going to die being powered on and off, either due to heat cycling, high, extreme heat, or just the fact that the dielectrics do break down over time due to the current passing through them.
So the good news with this, from a hobbyist perspective, is I believe that we now have 100% replacement coverage on all of the chips. The VIC chip has just been rebuilt, and I believe it's heading for open source. There's a couple of YouTube videos about that out. The PLA...
News to me. Ooh, I'm gonna have to look
It's fascinating. Yeah. This new VIC chip is just fascinating.
And I mean, it's new as in like the last month or two he's gotten it working. So yeah,
it's a FPGA based, and it has some additional bitmap graphics modes and additional features that the stock does not have. It's really a fascinating video. It just got posted maybe last week.
Yeah.
Making the rounds.
Yeah, and then the PLA, you can get a lot of replacements for that. The Plankton, the dual chip GAL mod. There's like 6 or 7 replacements for this. The ROMs are obviously easy to replace. The hardest part about the ROMs is the pin count on the chips. You got to make an adapter in some cases. The 6510 the 6502 is still being made, but the newer version has a different pin out, I believe. Like instruction set compatible, but pin incompatible.
And the 6510 also has that I/O port thing that you have to deal with.
Yeah. And then I do believe that the CIAs have also been, and then everything else is 74 series logic. Oh, the clock chip. Jeff Burt just did the clock chip.
Yep.
And TO, the other one that I just read about that's just a couple months old is replacing all the DRAM with SRAM. There's two really neat kits. One's called Saruman, which I think is sort of a loose pun on SRAM. But if you have the 2-chip 64, the last ones, pops right in. If you have the ones like we're working on here with the 16 DRAM chips, you have to wire it up. And Ray Carlson has a nice document showing you exactly how to do that. I think that's what I'm going to do if I lose a RAM chip. I'm not going to screw around with DRAM anymore.
Just a quick plug for Eslapian, or however you pronounce his name, who makes the Saruman products. I dealt with him for a number of things, including the 64K VDC upgrade on my flat 128. And I just want to say that he really stands behind his products. And if you have problems with him, he is right there to help you out.
It's like $13, right? It's like 15.
Yeah, you can't go wrong.
It's a great price and a great product that he stands behind. So big thumbs up there.
Well, I was excited to see some of us find something that might be RAM and try to convince T.O. to buy that.
Okay, so we've got a number 8 here on the bench, and there's a lot of socketed stuff here. So what do you want to see first? Want me just to plug it in, turn it on, and go for broke? Or...
I want to know which board it is.
Oh, it's a 250425 board.
Yeah.
And so this is the one that's like 8 RAM chips or something like
yes.
that?
Yeah. I happen to have 2 units with that same board in it. Yeah, I would say we should just throw power out it and see what happens. I mean,
all right.
Worst case scenario, it'll work.
And power switch is off. Video.
I mean, worst case scenario, one of the electrolytics might blow up, but that's entertaining. So
yeah, that's what we want to see.
All right, let me make sure I get the electrolytics in frame here. All right, let's go.
There you go.
Turning it on. Turning it on. No signal.
And nada.
Okay.
No signal. Yeah, go ahead and put the dead test. No signal might be timing or VIC to start with, because those are pretty early in the setup. Yeah.
Yep, still no signal. Okay.
I would suspect VIC and timing. What do you guys think?
There's also the possibility that the reset line is being held.
Okay, so we can test the reset line pretty easy with a meter, can't we?
The one I'm thinking, channeling Ray Carlson by reading him, he says, turn it on and off rapidly 5 times to see if it ever flashes colors, because that says PLA.
That's a really good comment. I had one that 9 out of 10 times it would come up black, but 1 out of 10 times it would come up with a pink screen, and that was the PLA. If I hadn't been flipping it on and off, on and off, on and off, I never would have noticed.
Or it could just be a bad power switch.
Yeah,
I've had one of those fail. That stinks.
You can always start with
shall we
testing
test the 5 volts?
So I do have the I have a light on the dead test cartridge,
okay,
which is lit up, and I don't know if that's 5 or 12 because I don't know.
LED is probably 5.
So let's do the old meter test, and this is my Radio Shack meter. I like it because it's self-contained. I could almost every day carry it. I'm running out of pockets though. Okay, so 5 volts on the LED and 4.7. And 5 volts on the regulator, which obviously should still be 5 volts, is 5.08. That's good. And let's work our way around the board to other places. And now I'm all cross-handed. Yeah,
you want to hit VR. You did the CAN voltage off VR2, or VR1 is the 12 volts.
The other voltage regulator, yeah, is the 7812. And
yeah,
we can.
So we should have 12 there, and I think the
VR1's the 12 and VR2 is the 5, if I'm not mistaken.
11.92.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. So we've got 5 volts and 12 volts all over the place.
That's nice.
Okay. So next up, I'm going to remove the VIC and clean that because I can. Chunk.
Never hurts. Start with the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
Work your way up.
So Matt, I understand that you are from the Virginia area, without getting too terribly specific, and you have a car that you have shown on your channel before.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That leads me to believe that you and I might have run into each other in person.
Oh, yeah. Where are you located without being too specific?
Well, I can be very specific about this because I don't live there anymore. I used to live in southern Maryland near Solomons, and I would race with the SCCA autocross group all the time.
Oh, okay. So out of FedEx?
Out of FedEx, and many years before FedEx existed, and all over Maryland and Virginia and all kinds of places.
So it's possible we crossed paths. I never took the FD to FedEx. I took other cars there back in many years ago, but I was well involved in SCCA Rallycross in the DC region for maybe a decade. And I did a few, then I shifted to NASA, and I did a bunch of the NASA weekends at Summit Point and VIR. Before, and I did a few SCCA, Friday nights at the track and stuff like that back then. But I moved to Lemons and Chump Car and stuff like that shortly after that. So been all around. But autocrosses I mostly do with the CDC, the Capital Driving Club.
Yep. I did a lot of stuff with Capital Driving Club out at the Bowie Stadium.
Bowie Bay Sox.
Yep.
We probably crossed paths at some point. Yep.
Yeah.
The car's been black. It's been silver, it's been anthracite gray, it's been many different colors. So
excellent. Yeah, so I was running a black Miata for a while, one of the cockroach cars of racing, because the green flag waves and they all scatter. And then I had a BMW 325iX E30 that I raced for a couple of years.
Nice.
And it was a uniform scuffed gray color. I don't know how that happened, but like 300,000 miles, still running strong. Wow. It was fantastic.
Nice.
And I beat the tar out of that car. So we cleaned out the VIC socket. I turned it back on. I wiggled the switch a couple of times, and still nothing. So
is the SID socketed on this one?
The SID is socketed, and I took that out before I started everything.
Okay, yeah.
That's like the first thing you do. Oh, socket gone. It's like a $40 chip.
All right. So this machine is released in 1984-ish, starting. I'm doing my history lesson.
Do we have these days
a way to test the reset line?
So Matt brought that up, and I'm going to let him lead that charge because I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I've never had to do that. I've never had one that was bad. So I would say logic probe is probably the best way. But can it be done with a meter? No.
Probably.
If it's held low or high, you could probably read it with a meter. If it's flapping, you're probably going to get something in between.
So did we do the fast toggle of the power switch to see if we get any color on the screen?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Let's see. So Don in the chat is asking if this is the other one. This is number 2. And Don had a really interesting story about these guys. He says what he would do, he bought these brand new, and I think he bought them brand new. And what he would do is they would break. He'd go into the local computer store. He'd say, "It's broken." And they'd say, "Okay, here's another one," and send him home. And then they would take this and repair it. And somebody else would come in and go, "It's broken." And they'd give him that one and send them home. And that's pretty cool because these things are kind of interchangeable unless they're really like super sentimental.
Mm-hmm.
So that was neat.
And did we do check for warm chips on this one?
Good call. Oh, yeah. Wow. That one's hot. We got one.
No, we've got a bad RAM chip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bad PLA and a bad RAM chip. No, the PLA was the other
PLA
one.
is the other one.
So it seems super speculative to piggyback that, but if it's only one hot RAM, maybe.
No, it's just that one. That one's not bad.
So what do you think of taking one of your socketed ones? And is it the same? It's not the same chip count, huh? As on your 60 clone.
My test rig. Let me check.
So it's a different density DRAM.
No, it's the same chip count, and it is the same 4264. So I can.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, this is the most convenient 64 debugging ever. You just say it, and Steve does it.
Yeah. No work involved.
Yeah.
Debug by wire. And so this technique is interesting to me. Does anybody know the technical reason why this works?
Putting one over top of it?
Yeah.
It depends on the problem.
Yeah.
If the chip's inputs or outputs are floating, it's the broken chip. It's not asserting or doing anything to the lines. It's You're one over, aren't you?
I think it's U11.
Okay, cool. So if it's not actively shorting or pulling up a pin, when you put one over it, it jumps right on the bus and does its job. But if the broken chip is shorting a pin, then it doesn't work. So it's kind of, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
So Joe, if a chip is shorting and putting out bad voltage on, well, it's not going to affect its neighbors, is it? That's just going to be a bad
It might, and it depends.
Like
For
dead
example,
downstream.
DRAM, they tend to have a lot of the data line shared, the address line shared, or vice versa, depending on how they wired them together. So one shorted RAM can actually kill the entire address bus.
Wow.
Nice.
And it all depends on implementation. I mean, some of the machines you're going to have your chips through like a 254 or 374 or something like that, basically wired straight to the CPU. But in other cases, you're going to have them through a memory management unit that does timing and phase 0, phase 1 on-off stuff for the video, and just, yeah.
So what I did first was I sort of squeezed all the pins together to make it clamp a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just took it off to double check that it was the right chip. And now I am connected again. And still nothing. We're not getting a signal. Thanks.
Oh, yeah, and also now that I think of it, the hot chip though suggests maybe a short.
Yeah.
So it's exactly the situation where piggybacking wouldn't work. If it was completely quiescent and the old chip was just not doing anything, that's the ideal situation for piggybacking, because then the new chip talks over it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that means we got a bad RAM chip. So do we do any further diagnostics on this, or we are at the desolder point on this one?
The only way you'd be able to diagnose it is to take those chips out and put it in another machine and test those chips somewhere else to make sure nothing else in that machine is bad. Because with the bad RAM, the only thing you can do is yank the RAM out, put it back, solve that fault, and then continue.
So you're saying take out all these guys, stick them in the 60 clone. Okay. Yep. That's a good idea.
Yeah, well, at least you can mark them off, and then you'll know.
Well, then you know. And I wish
that's pretty conclusive that the hot RAM chip that's hotter than the rest is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to work with that.
Too hot to touch.
I was just in that exact same situation last week. I was working on a board. It wasn't a Commodore. You can probably guess the kind of board it was. But I was working on it, and everything was fine. I spent hours fixing tons of things. And right at the last test, the machine died again. I'm like, what is this? And burned myself on a RAM chip that was good for days, and then decided just to die randomly while I was diagnosing stuff. So, yeah.
Did you really get a burn from it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, burned my palm right there. It's healed now, but
I've seen
it killed me.
I've seen the voltage regulator in mine with an infrared thermometer read over 250 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm like, you can cook on that.
Was that the Apple IIc you were working on, Joe?
Yeah. Oh man, that machine was a mess. Somebody else tried to fix it before me, and they were I don't know what they were trying to do to fix it, but it all ended up being what seemed to me a factory failure under one of the address latches, because I pulled the socket out, and there was the trace that was bad looked perfect on the board, but I had to bodge it on the other underneath to fix it.
There was
and
no
then I had to fix everything else on the board that whoever broke. But
I've seen that where I've had a trace that looked perfect. There was no corrosion that was visible, but somehow there was no connectivity between the 2 points, and I don't know what caused it, because I know it used to work and then it stopped working, but there was no visible damage.
Yes, good. Keep your piles of chips separate.
Yeah.
So you don't mix them up.
Then we can test them all.
So this machine worked. We booted up right into BASIC. I hate that.
Oh no.
It's fine. I can make another one. I made you. I can make another you. That was loose. They're either too tight and you're worried, or they're too loose and you're worried, you know?
So Tio, are these sockets that you got with the kit, or are these like double swipe, or what did you put in there?
So all of the ones that I put in are double swipe, except for these drilled sockets. And these are not. I bought this when there wasn't a parts kit. I had to go source parts.
So it was a bare board, and you had to just put your own stuff from a bomb or something in it.
Yeah, and oh, sorry about that. I didn't mean to smack you guys. I got a 6-pack off of eBay, and that's how I got started into the repair. And this is the board that I just rage desoldered everything on. And there's an 8-hour video on my channel of desoldering it. But you can see the solder mask is kind of messed up on it, and I was putting bodge wires everywhere, and like I was spending way more time troubleshooting this than anything else. And then the 60 clone came into existence. That's what I'm doing. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took all of the parts off of this that I could take off, and then I just decided to take all the rest of the parts off while I was at it, because it wasn't fun. But
now what you do is you put that in a nice matted frame, and then hang it on your wall as art.
Yeah. I was thinking that would be a great thing.
So it sits on my museum shelf over there, where I've got all my other stuff.
We have a question in the chat. Sizo's asking Dr. Dave why we need 8 RAM chips for 8 bits. I like that question.
I don't. You don't need 8 RAM chips for 8 bits. It depends on which motherboard you have and the chip configuration and density. So I think the smiley face was being facetious, but I'm not sure.
So I guess a better question, and I know the wrong way to answer this, but the better question would be, why did this board need 8 RAM chips?
There you go.
So why did they go? I mean, the different RAM configurations. My impression, and I'm no expert on this, is that as the 64 lived longer, higher density DRAM chips were more available and cheaper, and so they went to more density inside the chip and less traces to connect them. Mm-hmm. So we started off with something like 16 and ended up with 2 by the end of the time the 64 was done. So 2 32K RAM chips instead of the tiny ones. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. My understanding is that these are bit chips, and you need 8 of them to make a byte.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you mean that a contiguous set of bits in a byte is striped across the chips in this particular motherboard?
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, that's not the case, for instance, in the latter motherboards where there's only 2, where it might be 4 and 4 across the chips, or they could have rearranged the way it's laid out. Anyway, so yeah, that is a good question to look at, some of the different configurations of how you can wire up chips. You also probably know this from Sims, right? In the DRAMs, in the early 8-bit machines, we weren't doing a lot of swapping them out, but once you got into the 90s and you were using Sims, there were tons of different configurations you could use, whether you needed 4 at a time, 2 at a time, whether they were 4 meg Sims or 1 meg Sims, and it's exactly the same issue. And it's just all about what you can manufacture and what's available and what's available cheaply.
In combination with the architecture of the machine itself, its data path size, its address size, and all of that.
To go back to the thing about the static RAM replacement, that's fascinating to look at. If you go to Ray Carlson's document about it, he has screenshots of it. You look at he's taking this little board that and then it looks like a spider. You take the wires out of them and wire them to each of the places where those chips were. And it looks like he only needed select, like the chip select, because you don't have to wire up wires to every pin on every one of those DRAMs you took out. You only need to know which chip it was going at. That's my guess anyway, is that there's select lines that you're soldering.
All right, gentlemen, anyway. Are you done all your hard work there?
This is better than most relationships, Theo. We just tell you what to do and you do it.
All right,
you can tell us how it works.
Well, we got a nice strong video signal, but not enough of a video signal. Mm-hmm. So we still have a bad chip.
But we have a step in the right direction. Do you want to try it with the dead test and see if we get something else, see if it indicates one of the chips is bad?
Sure. And if you do get a dead test cartridge, try and get one that either has something to grab onto or a case, which would also be something to grab onto.
And, I mean, it was sort of your point, Theo, but we're putting you in a real disadvantage because you're working quickly and you're working from above the board. one pin out of that socket could ruin it. And Adrian Black just had this happen in his last video, and he's done this more times than most of us. But he said with a camera there, you don't pay attention and you don't know if you got it in the socket.
Well, the camera is like this is my face, and I'm looking at the back side of the camera. Yeah,
it's really difficult to solder.
45-degree angle to see that it's in the socket.
Yeah, and this socket is not a dual wipe socket. It is a single wipe, and I was having trouble getting the chip in, so it's still dead with the dead test cartridge.
That's interesting. So I don't know if we want to do this in this video, but the thing that I would want to do is walk these out one chip at a time back to your originals, because that would kind of cover the case of also of one being inserted wrong, and it would start to isolate which one it is instead of we just made you drop.
He's got time. 8
chips at a time.
Anything for you guys.
I was going to suggest that you do it one chip at a time, but I just wanted to sit back and watch and see how far you would go.
I got time.
So this is the 60 clone board. This is one of 3 different replacement C64 main boards if we discount the Ultimate line of products now.
No. Well, yeah. Okay, so there's the 60 clone, which he has like 4 60 clone models. And then there's the Ultimate 64, so that's 2. And then there is, it's the B model, whatever. I don't know that model number off the top of my head, but there's another board guy out there that made that. So that's 3 that I know of.
And Jim Drew is making a new 64 replacement board with a few strategic upgrades. Not on the market yet, but the prototype exists and it does work. Apparently.
I need to get one of those chip lifters. Come on.
Not only are
Stole an idea from Adrian Black, I have to admit. I saw him use it. I'm like, getting one yesterday.
Well, it certainly is an interesting time to be a Commodore 64 enthusiast. Let's put it that way.
So there is there's some logic to all of that. Did not want to do that.
Is that a pun?
No. This will happen with anything. So this happened like a generation ago with model railroading, where you were a kid and you played with model trains, and then you kind of put them all away. This one does not want to come out. And then you got older, and your kids moved out of the house and all that jazz, and now you have time to get back into it. And black screen. And so you get it all back out. So this is the same thing that's happening with the retro computing scene.
The kids have reached a place of financial stability in their life, and they're able to invest a little bit now, and then you see the prices drive up, and now SID chips alone are costing more than entire machines did just a year ago.
That's another problem, is trying to sell one of these things in working condition, or non-working condition for that matter. The parts are obviously worth more than the whole.
To Matt, your observation about the different configurations you can have to replace a 64, what I'm fascinated by is it lets us, there's all these entry points. Like, I really love this specific 64. Like, I want to use it. So I went for the Ultimate 2 Plus cartridge instead of going for the Ultimate motherboard, because I want to use this as long as it works. And that's kind of fun, because there's a little bit of the antique aspect of it. It's there.
Oh yeah, I absolutely love using original hardware. Don't get me wrong. It's just the fact that using it is going to expedite and hasten its demise.
Yeah.
That's the duality of our hobby.
We don't want that lack of the old equipment to be an obstacle to people that want to get into it. So
I think boards like this, though, are helping bridge that gap for us that want to use original hardware, but it's getting so inaccessible now. With a board like this that's almost identical to the original hardware, and with things like the ARM SID and the PLA replacements and things like that, we're able to effectively emulate the real hardware, and it really is real hardware, just modern versions of it. So you can do the thing, and I don't know.
It reminds me of the WAS. It's like the WAS edition of the Apple II and the 2GS, right? I'll get the sexy red one.
All right, so now I'm down to the point where I got to replace the CPU. Replaced everything else except for the CPU and the PLA.
Okay, so then we'll have the CIAs out, the ROMs out,
Mhm.
and that's a reasonable configuration for the dead test.
Yes.
Okay.
The dead test has all the ROMs built in, and I'm not doing any interface adapting. So what'll happen if you do this without the CIAs in, at the bottom of the dead test cartridge screen, there are two clocks. The one clock from this CIA and the other clock from that CIA, and they will be wrong because they're not there to keep time. Okay.
Need a dead test tester.
Yeah.
So that's the rest. That's our machines that aren't broken.
So that was my known good CPU, and that
Wait,
wasn't.
You have a machine that's not broken?
Today I do.
Today,
as you know,
tomorrow,
from my emails to you last night, that wasn't the case. But today
roll
it
a
is.
coin.
Okay. Oh, where did my PLA go? That one.
And I think we're seeing why I don't work on these machines as often as Adrian Black, for instance, but why he rates the check marks on the chips. You can tell the difference between the one you pulled and the one you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep, that's another thing I stole from him. I started doing that.
Hey.
Bad PLA
Alright.
then, huh?
Okay, so can you I lost track of where you were with which chips are in here? The ones from the this is the least amount of chips from the bad machine.
This is the VIC from the bad machine, the processor from the bad machine, and a good PLA.
Nice.
So you've got two bad PLA machines.
Yeah, shock.
Well,
and the memory in that one.
Yeah.
Bad. Yeah, and the memory, right?
So I've got that marked down. Okay, so
we don't. Yeah.
So what I do not know is whether the rest of these are good. So let's put them back in real quick. Well, no, I'm not going to do that because I won't know. I was going to say I can put all of these chips back in except for the PLA and the other board, and no. But while we have this on the bench, let's do it. Let's do this and start putting these chips back in and see if it boots up.
Yeah, I like that experiment because you identifying the PLA problem, it's worth the try of putting them back in.
And if we have time,
taking them out.
Once you're done with that, you can put all of the known good chips back in the bad machine with a good PLA and run that test again.
No.
I'm liking the quality of work I'm seeing out of TO. I might send him a machine.
I'd be happy to have it. It'd be fun to play with. I'll send you a bill.
You don't have to send me a bill if you have my 64. You just explained how the parts were worth more than the whole.
Yeah.
You just tried to sell it.
No, I meant like if you wanted it fixed and you wanted it back, I'd send you a bill for the parts that I replaced. Because the VIC is $40 some. The PLA is $20. The SID is $20 for a fake one. It's $50 for a real one. Okay, so every chip works except for the PLA.
Cool.
Well,
good job.
Let's let it go through one iteration.
That means we got one board fully diagnosed, at least. Bad PLA, well, you could replace those chips and find a bad trace, but I doubt that.
I could replace those chips and make a bad trace.
Yeah,
I've done that too.
In there. Mm-hmm.
On purpose or by accident?
Yes.
That's the magic of editing. We don't have to show them that.
That's right. You don't know the starting condition unless I tell you.
All right, screen RAM is good. We're testing color RAM now. And this is the one that you can't see because what it's doing is it's checking every single character spot on screen with like a white on white. And then it does this thing. And then it sings. It's my favorite music. Which we're not going to hear. But we should be hearing. Apparently Dave's hearing it.
Yeah. I'm hearing.
He's hearing it in his head.
We're all
hearing it in our head.
The King Kong one, or the
the 8-bit dance party.
Oh yeah, Adrian's dance party.
All right. Okay, so it doesn't say anything about the ROMs in this version, so I waited for nothing. Okay, that's off. Now, parts out. and I will wrestle with that CIA chip again. Which this is not the one I wrestled with, it's the one next to it. Yeah,
Well,
so
the good news is none of the expensive chips are broken.
right.
And, you know, with $40 for a SID, it's hard to spend that much knowing that it's a ticking time bomb itself.
Right. And I'm not a purist in the sense that some people are. I just want it to make noise.
Yeah. I honestly, you know, with the Ultimate cartridge that has its onboard emulated SIDs, that sounds fine to me. I'm not an audiophile, and if I was, I wouldn't really be listening to a C64 anyway. So
People have their passions.
yeah, I appreciate it when it makes the noises.
Okay, so, and this is one thing I think is interesting that Adrian doesn't have is write on black Sharpies.
Yes, the silver Sharpie is the way to go.
Because
I've tried paint pens, but all they do is leak all over the place. So
Yeah.
I like the silver and gold Sharpies.
Yeah. Remember when we were young and you used black Sharpies on beige masking tape, and now we use silver Sharpies on blue masking tape? It's completely different.
okay, and this one actually had a check mark on it. Okay, let's put these chips back in because this is ambitious, or should we leave these chips out? I'm going to leave these chips out.
Might need it to test the next board.
Yeah. The thing that always bugs me is I get the ROMs backwards. So I'm going to sit these over there behind me so I don't knock them off the desk or beat them up unintentionally. Okay, cool.
Do you have a piece of foam around there? How are you keeping, or maybe I should just ask you, how was it that you were keeping straight which board the chips were from?
So the old chips were there and the good chips were there. Okay, so this one's done. Let's pull this out. And I don't know what kind of time limit you guys have, but we're at the hour mark now.
I'm cool.
I still have this much time left.
That is a good measurement of time, my friend. Okay, so...
Actually, you know what? I can make time. No problem.
What you drinking, Matt?
Got myself an Eggenberg Radler from Austria.
All right.
So you're putting the known good chips back in that board?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I need to turn around and grab the PLA from behind me, which I left in the other board. All right, working Vic is in. That's the bad PLA. And crud. Somebody tell me which socket the PLA goes in.
Repopulating the board that had the warm RAM, right?
Yeah, so we should get a blink on the dead test cartridge at best.
Is the dead test able to do that with no RAM?
I don't remember if I tried that or not.
Okay.
But I mean, it should. I think it blinks that it can't find the first RAM, but I don't know about zero RAM.
Okay. I'm just utterly curious. I'm not sure how they architected it exactly, and whether it tries to use zero-page locations for any of its routines. And if it tries to do that, if the RAM's bad, then the CPU can't execute anything.
Well, if I was a developer, the next best thing to do with this thing would be to put a RAM chip on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be self-contained. Okay, so which socket does the PLA go into? Because I know
One in the middle.
one of these two. One of them's the SID socket, and I think it's U17.
Yeah, the SID is up by the CPU on that variation of the board.
Yeah, so the socket name didn't change, just the location, which I found weird.
So we had a question. The original art flick. Did I read that right? That Matt was responding to, who was asking what was the most common failure mode for the PLA, and Matt said black screen, occasionally solid color. Another thing that it can do is cause the cursor to be intermittently lost. Again, I'm looking back at Ray Carlson stuff. Screen freeze or program crashes. So there's some more minor ones, but usually by the time someone gives up and sells them to Steve, whatever, they don't have a screen anymore.
I may have misinterpreted the question too. He may be asking how the PLA fails, and to answer that, it's generally due to heat. it runs very, very hot. And so it's one of the most common failure points on these machines.
Isn't the PLA running at a faster clock than the CPU because it's doing all of that? It's basically doing all the logic cycling between the SID and the RAM to get data into the SID fast enough to shoot to the screen. So it's running at something like 7 megahertz along with the SID.
And in Ray Carlson's doc, he says it's the most common chip to fail, and mentions that it, like Joe said, hot, like the SID would.
Yeah, these machines didn't come with much of a heatsink from the factory. There's an RF shield that acts as a heatsink, which is usually thrown away. You can extend the life of your PLA by adding some aftermarket heatsinks to them. There you go. There's the heat shield.
This is the heat shield.
Yeah.
Trying to think and see if this will focus. The way I ended up deciding to do my board is because we know that the die is right in the middle and the heat's in the middle. I just put my heat sinks there, and then I use that nice silver marker to write what it was that I covered up.
Yep.
But there's some people that are definitely believers in putting the heat sinks all the way across the chip. But I think you're just going on plastic with a lot of that.
I did that, but for aesthetics, because it was bothering me being only one.
I loved writing on it by hand. That was just fun. It felt like it was really my machine then.
Okay, my bin of dead parts is not as impressive as Adrian's, and it's also filled with other tools, so we won't be showing that. But this is now very suspect as being bad, and this machine did not boot even with the good PLA, but it does have bad RAM, so we're gonna box this one up and move on to the next
one. Put a mark on that chip so you know which one it is.
Good idea.
And when I was reading about just this afternoon or this morning about that static RAM replacement for the DRAM, they said that the DRAM was becoming hard to find. Is that really the case? I've not looked.
I haven't had a problem.
I haven't seen any 4116 or 4164 style DRAM made in years. It's just not used anymore. I mean, it's 1-bit RAM.
Yeah.
So you have to use a bunch of it, and the use case for them is so minuscule now. I mean, you can buy tiny little TO92 chips at 256 K of serial RAM in it for SPI. Like, what's, there's no market for it.
Yeah. So the SRAM replacement, they said it uses a lot less power because it doesn't. Dynamically refresh. But the other complication was replacement PLAs do not work well with it. There's apparently a voltage issue. Some of the replacement PLAs will only drive signals at 3.7 volts instead of closer to 5, and apparently the SRAM didn't like that.
Okay.
So but I definitely think that would be fascinating. If I had a replacement, I think I would do that experiment for $15.
Was there any suggestion as to which PLA's replacements worked better with that solution, or they're just like some might work, some might not?
The gentleman who's the author or the creator of that, the one called Saruman, he just said be sure to use an original PLA. So maybe it means any of the others are considered suspect. So that's definitely a complication we wouldn't want. But there is another project that also is a static RAM based one.
From what I understand, the PLA itself is kind of like a ROM chip where you can just download the code off of it.
Yeah. It basically it's a function, right? It's a grid of wires. If this thing comes in here, state machine. I wonder if we could just 74 logic could bring it back up to the right levels of voltage. I bet probably some add-on could do that.
Okay.
So where are you, Steve?
So I'm putting machine number 8 away because I need to desolder RAM and put new RAM in it. And this is another machine. This one's sexy. This is machine number 9.
And which motherboard is this one?
Oh, look at that. There's a cracked capacitor. There's a thing. This is another 250407, but this is like nice and clean and dark green. And
so that's a motherboard introduced in '83. That in a strong one, like million plus produced, I think.
Yeah.
So I picked up a flat 128 that had never been opened up or never been serviced before, and it had 2 cracked ceramic capacitors in it as well. Do you think those got damaged at the factory, or do they spontaneously fail over time due to age-related or heat-related issues?
You said it was unopened, meaning the chassis was unopened, but the machine was used? It wasn't like in
The machine was
boxes.
used, but it had never been repaired. It was a one-owner machine, and he had never had it serviced.
I would find it highly unlikely for ceramic like that to crack under normal use. It would have to be awfully hot for it to do that. That's going to be more likely due to shock. But having it not open, like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's weird. You'd think the most likely way to ceramic would be cracked is someone trying to pull it. The job.
My guess is because the cases have some amount of flex in them, it's possible that it was either stacked and got pushed down on, perhaps, or someone hit the keyboard a little too hard and just pushed because they're sitting really close.
Okay. So
luckily, those are all super easily replaceable anyway.
That capacitor
Diagnostics, you just cut it out and be like,
broken.
Yeah, this is probably the most common bread bin, the 250407. I'm seeing it's like something like 2.5 million of them in UD3.
The one I have, my one bread bin.
All right, so we got a black screen right off the bat, and the PLA.
Are you looking at that reference document you talked about?
Yeah, I'll post that as a comment. It's basically someone did a study to try to estimate, in a reverse engineer how many 64s were actually sold. But in the process of doing so, he did this really nice timeline showing the build or the manufacturer of each motherboard model in waves like that. I'll put it as one of the comments in the video.
Yeah, that. Okay, yep, I'm looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Dave, drop a comment in the chat real quick. I'll add you as a moderator. And same thing for you, Joe, and then you'll be able to drop links in the chat. Yeah, 7 and 8 are definitely yours.
My power shall know no bounds.
Whenever that comment decides to come through. Okay, so this is machine number 9. We have a broken cap, and I've already tried to turn on without the dead test, and it just gave us a black screen. So now I'm trying with the dead test. Oh, blinking. That looks like 1. It blinked once, and then it blinked once again.
It's going to do it again.
And then it stopped blinking.
That's exactly what happened before. Oh.
3.
I think that's 1.
I think it's 1 that's just happening over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so can one of you look up the document and see which chip that is?
I have it open right here. Let me see.
All right, Dave, you're up to moderator now. You should be able to repost.
The shift return didn't cause my things not to get posted.
Well, okay. So you'll see that you posted the link, but the rest of the world doesn't because you don't have permissions to make links. So just try it one more time. And then I don't have Joe's comment yet. And make sure that you look at the links in the description down below for all these other fine channels and subscribe to them. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I'd appreciate that as well. Let me know that this is a thing that you guys would like to see again in the future.
Do you know how to correlate the artwork number to Rev? I've got a chart that shows Rev AB, B-3, and Rev E.
I do. I can cheat. I can read the Rev number off the board, and it's Rev B.
Perfect.
Right after the number.
What have you got?
B.
He's got a lot of things.
Bravo.
Rev B?
Baker.
All right. Rev
Beverage.
Baker is one flash is U12 according to the chart.
Okay, so let's piggyback U12.
Did you do the heat test on it?
No, let me piggyback first because it's cool right now. It's cool, man. It's cool.
Just as an aside about checking the heat, I found instant read thermometers like the Thermapen you use for cooking work great for contacts to it. Much easier to use than an infrared where you don't exactly know where you're aiming.
So far, that broken cap is still working. Well, there's no indication that it's not working. Let's put it that way. All right, power on. And it still looks like 1 to me. Let me make sure I got a good connection on this.
I would say that broken cap, if it's not shorted, it's probably not going to show you or cause any problems. It's just a decoupling capacitor.
Near the RAM though.
Oh yeah.
Noel's Retro Lab, just a video I think you might have posted even this morning, actually found he was working on a 64 motherboard that said it was like the ugliest repair he'd ever had to make. He ended up finding a canister electrolytic was broken, one leg was broken, and that ended up being one of the problems.
Yeah, on my flat 128 with the 2 broken ceramic decoupling caps, it worked perfectly fine. I replaced them anyway, obviously.
I agree with the disc ones. A lot of times you can get those out of there.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're all broken, but a single one is usually likely not gonna.
Yeah.
You probably wouldn't even know it was broken unless you looked at it.
And that was U12, right, Matt?
Let me double check.
Because I'm not like
Yep.
trying
One
to
flash,
fix.
Rev B U12.
Not trying to fix the wrong chip here. Yeah, that's not working. Piggyback method's not working. Let me pull this piggyback off, and then we'll do the heat test. Let me run to the kitchen real quick and get my wife's instant read meat thermometer. She'll be real happy.
I'm gonna have to remember that for next time. I've been using an infrared, and I wasn't able to tell anything on my last machine that had bad RAM.
Yeah.
Which is not to say there was a short, but I couldn't get a solid read on anything.
Yeah, these guys aren't warm at all. Oh, that went solid. I hit the multiplexer.
Oh, hey.
Ooh.
So I'm gonna pull the multiplexer and clean the socket, and then we'll try again.
What's the multiplexer? What is that chip?
It is.
What's it multiplexing?
I believe that's how it gets to do the RAM addressing.
Ah, okay. So you mean 74 logic chips around?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, this is a 74257.
Right. Yeah, I also have that in mind. Cool.
Looking up the datasheet for the 74LS257 now because I'm interested. 2-line to 1-line data selector multiplexer. Yeah, it's basically using the bank. Do. Is that multiplexing basically between the CPU and the SID? Or not the SID, the VIC?
I honestly don't know.
I haven't looked at the schematics.
See, you boys that pull out the schematics, you guys impress me. I can't do that yet. But it isn't.
Be careful. The last time I looked at the Commodore 64 schematic, the one I downloaded had the wrong chip in it.
It's really interesting to see some of the people who worked with these things in the beginning, because they were so limited but still so accessible in terms of what all they did. Like Dave Brown in the chat has said, you can fit this entire computer in your own mind when you're trying to figure out what's going on, because there's, I mean, first off, you have to from an assembly language programming perspective, but on top of that, there's just not that much of it. So you see people that have made custom RAM boards and stuff like that. All right, so we got that cleaned and resocketed. Let's try that. And we're back to blinking.
What was the board number on that again?
250407.
Rev B.
And it's artwork number 251137 Rev B. All right, so we're back to flashing. Back to one flash. I think it was one flash. I wasn't counting.
To your point, we were fortunate to be able to grow up with machines like this, and not something that was infinitely more complex and that we couldn't fathom how it really works from a low level. But it's also really cool to see, and I'm hanging out in a variety of different vintage computer or retro computer chat rooms. There's a bunch of people who didn't grow up with these machines, who are now looking back at them and learning how they work, which is really cool too.
I didn't have the electronics background until I started watching a bunch of YouTube videos and seeing this stuff. And I picked up so much more just by grabbing kits and putting them together. So that's where my knowledge comes in. Most of what I know is by hands-on. and I have zero electronics background. And I picked up quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been a software guy for my whole entire career.
Yeah.
Just got back into retro within the last couple of years and just doing things, building kits, fixing stuff. It's definitely the best way to learn, I think.
Watch awesome channels like ours.
Exactly.
And learn from
No,
us
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, it's great. The fact that you can learn anything from YouTube these days.
If you can't pick something up, you're not trying. Okay, so I think we might be at a dead end on this board without having to desolder that one RAM chip.
Because there's no socketed anything in that other than the VIC and
the kernel. And the kernel's been replaced, and the VIC is lighting up because we're getting the blinks on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice to. I mean, I wouldn't mind moving on as long as we have something. We've gotten somewhere for the next step for you afterwards.
Yeah.
Those 257s. There's two of them right above each other, right?
Yeah, these two right here.
Did you try swapping them?
I did not. I can do that.
Just to see if the blinks move. Because if the blinks move, it might indicate that it's following the 257 onto a different set of RAM or a different RAM chip.
And I have a bunch of replacement 257s, so we can do that.
I'm not trying to hold you back or anything. I'm just thinking.
Well, technically, you're trying to move me forward.
Oh, okay.
Right? You're just trolling.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, replace some more chips.
Well, it is interesting that the machine sort of locked up when you did touch that chip.
Yeah.
Before.
It might be the socket. It might be. I highly doubt it would be a cold solder joint on the socket. Could be. Bad trace. Then again, stray capacitance could have just caused the entire machine to just go and freeze. Who knows?
So I got it.
It's just a coincidence.
I got an old kit that I'm building for a future video, and it is so old that it has capacitors with color code stripes on it. And the board itself is running 1 picofarad capacitors, which are like near impossible to find. And I found out that just holding the leads together with the meter to test to figure out what their capacitance is was affecting the capacitance. Like, I am a capacitor. I just kept charging.
You're at least a capacitor.
At least.
You're also a resistor.
I provide a lot of resistance. Okay, that's solid.
That's the failure mode when you touched it. That's interesting. You know that there's a code for solid.
I wonder if the SRAM replacement. I guess you would just. It probably also. I don't know if it removes the 74 logic, or it still relies on that. We end up having to replace that as well.
Okay, so here's an interesting factoid from the Diagnostic Dead Test Manual. Some RAM failures may cause the dead test to display incorrect results. The majority of these will display a 1 flash code indicating a defective data bit 7. If the associated RAM is replaced and the results remain the same, the real failure normally turns out to be a defective RAM IC associated with data bit 0 or 1. So the LS chips that you're looking at, probably.
So in your which RAM to replace table, it should tell you which one of these is which bit. So you're saying that bit 7 is the one that we suspect, which was U12, but
Correct.
Also there's 2 other bits. What are those 2 chips?
0 and 1, was it?
Yeah. Defective RAM IC associated with data bits 0 or 1.
Okay, and what are the socket numbers for those?
For the RAM, it's socket U9 and U21.
U21. Okay, let's try those guys, piggybacks. And that's interesting. Holy moly, found it. Hang on. So U21, which is the one that you mentioned. Look at that. I don't know if you guys can see that.
Oh,
you can see daylight through the board because it's
crunchy.
There's some crunchy solder jobs and there's some missing solder altogether. So there's no amount of piggybacking that's going to fix that. But that is also I would call that a dry socket. I don't know what you would call it, but there isn't any metal in the inside of the socket itself. I've got legs going through. I'm going to try and hit that with some solder since I do see the chip legs going through.
As long as the trace is still there and it'll bite, it should work.
There might be some oxidation on there. You might want to try and use some of your gunk off real quick and see if that cleans it up a bit. Maybe a little
Or flux.
brushy brush.
Well, that got rid of a nodule of something. That's hideous.
Huh.
That is really like super bad.
So it doesn't look like it was reworked at all?
Oh no, this chip has been replaced.
Oh, yeah. So somebody might have just given up right halfway through that.
Yeah, they've touched the RF modulator, and they've touched one of these ports here, and these have been sanded down. But
Jeez, that's all over the place.
the
60 clone for it.
yeah, I know. The what's it called? The joystick shield port cover dress up thing over here was floating, so that might have just been in shipment or in storage. And the power switch has been touched.
Blunt force trauma.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my flux remover. Over here mixing chemicals. I'm gonna get high.
Demonetized.
Yeah.
What kind of flux are you using?
I haven't gotten to flux yet, but this is MG Chemicals Flux Remover.
Got it. Okay.
I'm still trying to
misheard you.
clean up the mess from before because this is pretty bad. And you guys
Do
on
you like
this.
that flux remover? Do you?
So I don't know because this is only like the 4th time that I've used it, and what I wind up doing, and it's probably a bad technique of mine, is I will solder on too much stuff, and then I'll have too much flux on the board, and then I'll go to clean it off, and the board gets all sticky.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I was trying that. So what I found that I have to do with that is I have to clean it off, and I don't have anything to apply that with, so I can't even use it. But this is the flux that goes with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to put the flux remover on to clean it, and then I have to put the electronics cleaner on to clean the flux remover off.
That's pretty typical. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Okay. Yeah.
I was wondering when we get to the soldering action tonight.
I was wondering if I was even going to turn it. I am not seeing anything happen here.
Yeah, I was going to suggest against it, but impressive that you got to. My confidence level is, even if you solder this perfectly, I don't trust this board at all.
There's always dodge wires.
If you say you saw something that looked like it was sandpapered,
We have to assume that it worked at some point in time.
Somebody
Just need to return it to that state.
I hope it has good memories about that.
No pun intended.
Or maybe it was. And that's why these older computers like these are so much fun to work on compared to something from the 90s.
Oh yeah,
because they're 2-layer boards. You can see everything. You can just, okay, this wire goes here, attach it. Hey, look, it works now.
Yeah, I mean, you can literally replace the traces with something else.
Yeah. Yep.
The entire schematic fits on one 8.5 by 11 printout. You just plop it down. And
do you guys follow Colin on This Does Not Compute? That's a really nice channel. He does lots of 90s electronics, and one of his favorite, and my favorite techniques is use through hole where there used to be surface mount. Like, nice. You're like, I can make this so I can see it.
Yuck. This is ugly. I can't even see it properly, and it's ugly.
It's not ugly if it works.
I say that all the time. If it's ugly and it works, then it's not ugly.
that part faces down anyway, so as long as it works, you never have to look at it.
Everyone watching won't disclose what they've seen here.
So this trace goes on the top side of the board anyway. But I don't know where it goes. Oh, it goes to ground. So this bottom trace here, this solid line, hooks up to that pin on every chip. So that would be a pretty easy thing to replace. Yep. Let's see if we made some progress.
I'm sorry, it's so small for me to see. I can't even tell. Were you soldering were you soldering a socket, or were you soldering a chip?
I was just trying to resolder the pins that were already there, and it looks.
But on a socket or on a chip?
Oh, just on the chip on the board itself. There's no socket there.
Okay.
I don't want to get the noisy desoldering iron out and go through that mess right now. Okay, so we've tried, and it was
going for the real power on here.
Well, the switch was already on, and I plugged power in, and so we have a black screen still. So we can get really advanced, and I can grab a little jumper and jump that.
Just want to do a quick continuity test and see if you can tone it out to ground there.
Okay.
Good idea. You can also, since most of the address and data lines are connected, you can gang those across as well. Just pin 1 on each of them, and 2 on each of them.
Yep, so that's dead. That's good.
That's just the last hop.
Dead.
Yep.
Good. 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 That one's dead. That one's dead. And that one's dead. But I don't know.
Are those 4164s?
Yeah, they're 64s. These aren't supposed to connect.
Yeah, those upper left ones don't connect to each other. Those are the specific select lines for those individual chips.
So these ones do. Pin 3. And this one doesn't. So I'd have to jump those 2 pins. And those 2 pins is my guess.
Looking at the data sheet now because I'm a nerd and I'm really curious.
Okay, those don't connect. Those do connect. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of these too.
Yeah, pins 3 and 4 well, no, 3 will. Pin 4 probably won't because that's the address selection.
Okay, so this is machine number 9.
And it all depends on how they wired it, but yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest on this is that U21 needs a lot of love, and it's out of scope for the video right now. Because that'll be an entire, I would probably just bodge almost every pin. I've counted 3 or 4 pins already that I need to bodge.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on to another one.
Do you have a particular method you like to do when you do that bodging?
This would be the second time in my life I've done bodge wires, so I'm all ears.
Okay.
Tell me.
Well, there's a million different ways to do it depending on how broken it is. The easiest way is if you know where the wire goes, you just literally connect the 2 pins together with a coated wire and it just works. If it's on the back side of the board, it's going to go in the machine and nobody's ever going to see it again. You can also get down to the level where you're scraping off solder mask and replacing, just following the trace back where it goes, recovering it with UV solder mask and fixing it again and doing all that. So
yeah, I watched some of those guys. I think it was Jan Bita who did the Amiga board, and he like sanded down the entire motherboard in this section and then reran all of the wires and then repainted it green. No.
Yeah.
Not for me.
It can depend too on the level of damage. If it's 1 via or 1 trace, it's you just run a couple real quick connects and you're done. But if you're working with those machines that have the electrolyte or the battery damage, you almost have to sand it or scrape it down to find the bad traces to begin with, and just repair them all at once. So you get some sort of level of operation to even be able to do any sort of diagnostics to find out what else is bad on the machine.
And Joe, I don't know if this is what you meant by the first comment you made about, or the first suggestion, but one of the things, this is like one of the first places, even if you're not used to looking at schematics, that looking at schematics is great, because sometimes there's a place you can attach the bodge wire that is nowhere near the tight place where you're working.
True.
Go to the edge of the board or something, and then you don't need to know electronics. You just need to follow the lines on the schematic and see all the places you could solder it. That's probably one of the key things, because if you're working in too tight a spot, you can destroy the stuff around it.
Good point.
Guinness says 10 to 17, but other sources say 18 to 22. He's referring to you, Dave.
I'm sorry, I didn't follow.
So you were talking about something about tank counting problem method to better estimate in theory, and then he says,
there's a couple. One of the folks in the chat is talking about how many 64s were there ever, and we're in this ridiculous situation where Commodore lost track and they don't know. And so the reference that I posted, I don't find that as interesting, the estimation and the German tank problem thing. They're observing serial numbers I think it was World War II, right? They're observing serial numbers on tanks and trying to guess how many there must be if it's a random sampling that's not biased. Right. And they used that method to estimate the 64s. What I liked more about the reference was just all in one place, all the motherboards listed by the years they were introduced, and then a nice plot that showed, basically how common your 64 is or isn't.
So the first two, number 7 and number 8, were from Don in the chat, and we've made some progress on those. And then number 9 and number 10, I picked up. I've got a daily feed from eBay telling me about special C64 deals. And this one came up, and Matt will like this.
Ah.
And I'm like, all right, I got to buy this.
Very colorful.
And this one came with the one that we just looked at. And this is a fantastic spray paint job. And I was going to put the 60 clone in. This is real spray paint, though. This isn't that Plasti Dip where you can go back.
That's candy apple red.
Yeah, that totally is right. Candy apple. That's nice.
So this is my racing 64. All right. So power's off, plug power in, and we can get rid of this keyboard because it's already not connected. And
407.
Yeah, this is now the most popular revision that I have. Okay, we got the capture card running. Not a whole lot socketed. Turn her on. Uh-oh.
Oh. We got screen.
That is indicative of color RAM or attribute RAM with the rainbow colors.
So all we're seeing is funny colors.
We got text.
Now this is one, like, if you just, even without the drive on it, if you issue like a DOS command, is everything else working, is what I'm wondering. Like, is there a cursor?
Yeah, cursor's blinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cursor's blinking, so the CIA is good.
How can you see that? How do you see that? Is there a way to zoom? Maybe there's a.
I just made my window really big.
Let's do something here. Scene. Turn that off.
So it's the characters look well formed, but they're the wrong colors. Is that
correct?
Look at that, the magic of live streaming.
Oh, nice. Okay.
That actually, I like it just the way it is. It complements the red case. Maybe you just want to leave it.
Yeah, definitely.
You should load some software just the way it is.
Play a game or something. I want to see that in rainbow color. That'd be fun.
As far as failure modes go, this one is the most entertaining.
Might as well. There's a toroid on the power cable, on the power LED cable, and the LED is still red. All right.
Mine has that.
That's normal. Okay, some keys work. So 10 print, and we lost the 10 and the R.
The R may just be the same color as the background because of the attribute problem.
All right, so question mark, that works. Quote. Hey, that works.
All right.
Okay, so it looks like kernel's running, basics running, character ROM is okay.
CIA is good.
So this is just that color RAM thing, right?
I think so. I'm looking for that. What's the name of that that diagnostic journal you were looking at?
That's awesome.
I think I have the easiest fix. Just unplug the chroma and just use the Luma on your.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect.
But notice that it's scrolling and it's very specifically wrong.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, you're fixing it.
come on,
no,
baby.
now it's getting worse.
Let me warm it up. Oh, there it is. It's fixed.
We're good. It's
Aha!
all fixed.
Problem solved.
We just needed to reform the capacitors.
In the chip.
Yeah.
So what? Just so I understand what happened here, the color became normal the longer it was on.
Yes.
It went from all colors to all black. Then it went to the background color for a brief moment, and then it went to the right color.
This is interesting. So yeah, I want to know if there's hot chips, I guess.
Why does it say load? Huh? Oh, I know why. I pressed the load key. Anyway. Off.
Ooh.
I turned it off.
Oh, okay.
Turn it back on.
Yeah. So does it come up? Yeah. Okay. So that's what
Into the S and the upper at the top is all blinky.
Yeah, it's
Ah,
it's not well.
doing funny things.
All right.
So is this something where would you expect something like as simple as touching the color RAM might change that behavior?
It might if you have floating inputs, floating outputs.
Yeah, I mean,
You can change the capacitance, and it's gonna be closer to one state or the other, and then yeah.
or even blow air on it and see if it goes back to bad color.
Mhm.
That would be a nice one, because you should be able to, if it's something that's happened just when it's warmed up, you should be able to cool it off really fast with dust off.
Color RAM are those two in the very lower right, are they not?
These two?
Ooh, yeah, psychedelic, man.
Nice.
So what happens if you hit that with AirTO?
I don't have the ability to do that other than
I thought I saw you do it earlier.
no, it's just the electronics cleaner.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
That's not conductive, is it?
Here, use this.
Oh, thanks. I don't know if it's conductive. And I don't want to
Because
find
it would
out.
be cold coming out of the can. That would be.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I find it gets them cold really fast. Blowing the air.
We go get some ice cubes.
It's 30 degrees outside. You can go outside.
It might be.
Yeah, it is. I was just driving in it.
You know, if you've got a long enough extension for your compressor, I assume you have a compressor. You know, you could just expel regular old compressed air.
I do, but my compressor is in the garage, and the garage is not attached to the house.
Do you have a loose heat sink that you could just set on top of it? Is it warm even? I guess we should start with, is it warm? If it's not warm to the touch, then that's not going to do anything.
This one's a little warm, but it's also plastic.
Yeah.
Is that U6 there?
This is U8. This is U20.
Okay.
U6. You what? Yeah, U6 is going to be... Oh, dust. Up in this area, isn't it? U5, U4, U3. Yeah. Oh, just for grins.
Because they kept the chip names the same, or the identifiers the same, did they not?
They kept the socket numbers the same when they moved them.
Okay.
So like these two commonly swap, the SID and the PLA.
That's good to know. I wasn't aware they swapped them.
It depends on they're not swappable. Don't get me wrong. Don't
No.
put them in
Yeah,
the wrong one.
location on the board. Yeah, I haven't seen enough revisions.
But one of the boards that we worked on today had them in a different location. But it's interesting that this isn't flickering.
We'll do a color RAM test in a minute.
Yeah. Let me switch that over to full screen to make it easier for everybody.
U6 SRAM color RAM startup screen shows flickering characters with shimmering colors. Check also PLA. It says Ray Carlson.
There's that PLA again.
Is your PLA socketed?
No. And I just touched the PLA and now it's going crazy. But it's also doing the color RAM test right now.
Well, from a statistics point of view, PLA is to be checked.
Yeah, but it's also not socketed.
He says shows flickering characters, though. It didn't say different colors. They weren't flickering, they were just different colors, right?
They were changing colors in kind of real time at one point. I'm not sure if that's what he meant.
Here's one symptom. It says color problems such as random color checkerboard pattern on screen or no color. It doesn't say characters.
Is the PLA socket on this? It's not, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But the color checkerboard pattern, if that's the way the color cells were and we put characters on it, I wonder if it would look this way. That's the weird chip, U16, generic CMOS quad bilateral switch. Startup screen shows normal characters in multicolored rainbow. 74 LS74.
Ah, there you go.
So U29 to 74 LS74 says it can produce the multicolored character rainbow.
So there's 27, 16, 26. Where's why don't these go in numerical order?
Which one are you looking for again?
U29. That's 28.
That's the one that of the descriptions in the common causes of this. Yeah, that's general C64 stuff, not the 64C. It should be there, U29.
Yeah, well, there is the question. Where is there?
You can also look for the chip number 74LS74.
Oh.
If they didn't use one of the weird MOS numbered ones, which is a 74LS74 with some funky other number on it. I've run into that before.
So that's an 08 74LS258. This is 373. This is 139. These are the 257s. Those are RAM. There's 7406. And then this is a 556. So this is the one that you're talking about, Joe. This is U8.
I don't see your screen. Stand by.
Oh, yeah, that's my fault.
You're still on the. There you go.
Yeah. So I was looking around. This is a 7406. Is that what you said?
Okay.
74 LS74.
Yeah.
Oh, 74. I don't see one of those.
I'm going to pull up the schematic for this motherboard and see if it has that.
It might be underneath the shield here, too.
Ooh, good catch.
Because it is video related. So you just want to put it, in the video area. I know that's weird. And why is that? Oh, okay. I'm like feeling the board underneath the voltage regulator. Like, why is it warm? Because it's under the voltage regulator.
Yeah, you're right. The 74 on my board, the 74 LS74 is under the can on the right side and the far side from the brick. But I have a different motherboard than you. Oh yeah, it's quite a bit different. Let's see.
Yeah, it's right here.
It's
U29.
You found it?
Yeah, right there.
Oh, so it is in the can. All right. Well, that's an interesting one to check.
Do you have a spare 74 floating around?
Joe? What do you think of? Should you be able? There's probably some failure modes where you could piggyback a 74 logic chip, huh?
Oh, that's an even better psychedelic screen. Okay, so we're gonna say U29 is suspect on this one, and I don't have any of those. And are those the ones you can piggyback anyway?
I'm looking up. I don't. It's that thing about if the chip fails in a way that it's completely quiet, like unresponsive, then piggybacking would work. But anything that pulls a line low or high could interfere with the new chip doing what it's supposed to.
The way this is vibrating, though, would indicate to me that
not in a stable state.
Floating.
Oh, there we go.
Because it seemed to change with. Oh,
hey, you fixed it.
Yeah, again.
Because I thought it changed with temperature or runtime. I really like the idea of letting it sit again, or letting it cool and then heating it again. See if that's one of the ways. But you're just don't do that anymore. Flexing the board.
Just a little.
It's the problem is you're flexing not just the chips that we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, so same thing.
Anyway, that the specifically the rainbow effect on characters, that was the only thing I could see in the Ray Carlson pages that mentioned that symptom.
Whew. $10 to $20 million is a wide range, yes. All right. So what do you guys think of the show?
How do you mean? It's my favorite show this evening.
It's because you're the star.
The best thing I was in today.
I'm glad we have conclusive solutions for most of the machines here.
Yeah, I think you got somewhere to go in two places, two directions to go on one, or two things to do on one board and at least one on the other. So I like that. I would love it. How about this? I'll send you the SRAM thing, and you can decide if you want to put it in replace the memory one.
So yeah, that's a deal. The 60 clone board, everything's socketed, so I should be able to plug that board in, because there is, I don't know if it's the one you're talking about, but there is one where it's just a mini circuit board that you sit on top of.
It is, but it's for the 64C that just has the 2 DRAM chips.
I do not have a 64C.
And if you have the 8 or 16 chips, you have to break out wires. You have to cut some leads on chips and change the connections. But anyway, if it were my board, that's the thing that I would do instead of buying the other DRAM chip. But if you got them laying around, I'd use it.
Who's that? It's R38.
I mean, no offense, guys, but this was better than I thought we'd do.
Yeah. So I had a plan B. I mentioned this in the email. The plan B was if this didn't work out, we would just talk for a bit and have fun. But this has been great.
We accidentally did both.
Yeah. Okay.
So what do you guys have planned for March and Tosh? What's your first video going to be? Joe's got something.
My first March and Tosh video is a maybe potential collaboration with another person. I will leave it mysterious. Ooh.
Wait a minute.
This is that bad PLA. And I might have done that whole Adrian Black trick you were talking about.
Right.
I just saw that. The pin's there.
Well,
it
wasn't fair for us to do a command performance with the chip insertions. That's something that takes a little more time.
The real question is, did it come out of the socket that way? And that's why it was broken.
Right. So I have this trick. Did you see how I only put a slash on it? I can turn that into a check mark. I did that on purpose, and I did it on the RAM chip too.
What do you guys got planned for March and Tosh?
Well, the first video is going to be the Amiga software only emulation, which is coming along really nice, and I'm actually very, very surprised at how performant it actually is on an Amiga. And then following that, I'm going to take a look at the classic Mac core for the Mr. FPGA.
Ooh,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that in one of your videos, Matt.
What was that?
I said, I think you mentioned that in one of your videos.
Yeah, a few times. I definitely had it on camera in pieces once or twice, and I'd like to do it again. It's a great little piece of kit.
So I have a dual G5 cheese grater Mac. Now I don't think it's one of the later versions of the G5. It's not the liquid cooled one, and I am going to run Linux on that because I can, and see how well that works for, like, doing something modern. Because it's Debian is still supported on it, but I don't know how well it's still supported. If I can actually bring up like Firefox and launch YouTube videos, or go into Netflix and watch a Netflix video or something, like can it cope in today's world? And then I have a one of the white plastic iBooks, and I don't remember if it's a G3 or a G4. Did they make those in G3s?
I don't remember.
So I want to say it's a G4 off the top of my head, and it doesn't come on, and that's all I know about it. So
Did you try removing the battery?
No, I didn't do hardly anything to it. I actually lost the power supply for quite a while too. But I finally found
the connectors on those power supplies, it's that weird RCA jack kind of thing. This can go all sideways as well.
All right. So this thing's not progressing. I think it actually locked up. So that's all that we have for today. Check some heat. Nope, no heat. So the machine runs fine except for the color RAM. So, and that's our current suspect is U29 color RAM, so I will get that removed. I've got a nice little shopping list here that has some other notes on it, but there we go. Number 7 needed a PLA. Number 8 had a problem with U11 and a PLA, so U11 was the RAM chip. Number 9, U12 was what the blink code was, but U21 was the one that needed to be... U21? Yeah. U21 is the one that needed to have the socket installed or the jumper wires installed, and then this one here is the one with the color RAM issue. So
and the last one, it's not, I think it's not color RAM, it's just 74 logic in the video can.
Okay, U29.
So it's even simpler. I mean, the chip is simpler than that even. So yeah, cool.
Don't know if I have that chip in my chip supplies.
I don't think you'll have trouble finding it. Cool idea. That was
super jelly bean. Yeah,
that was fun. Good idea. We'll help you anytime.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this, Steve. It was a good time.
Yeah. So what's the next collaboration project we're going to work on?
Something for Marcintosh.
Yeah, that sounds like an obvious fit.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what, but
yeah, I have to think about it.
So local talk over Ethernet over the internet.
Yeah, so in the description down below there are links to everybody's channel, Joe's Computer Museum, Dr. Dave's Diversions, and Retro Bits. And there's also a link to the Discord where a couple of us are hanging out, and we can talk more about this stuff offline. But it has been a fantastic stream, fellas, and I appreciate it. And we will say goodbye. And as I like to say on my channel, I say thanks.